I want to welcome you to Aqus Cafe because Aqus Cafe we consider and we look at a little differently to most places that sell sandwiches and beer. We're a community center. We're a community center. Little tiny bit of background. I grew up in Ireland in my grandfather's pub. And there were two centres of community. There was the church, but there was also the pub. And the pub truly was the cultural community centre of any village that you grew up in. And I was lucky enough to see the things that went on in this community centre, my grandfather's pub. And that's why we created this one, to act as a kind of a gathering place for people to get to know each other. We are living in a more and more isolated society, yet we're more and more connected via cell phones and digital this and digital that. But one of the interesting things is that as it is becoming more and more isolating, the good thing about that is we are realizing that that being isolated has really, really tangible effects. Most of them not very good. But we're also realizing that this is a problem. And secondarily, we're realizing that it's actually fairly fixable. And it's called community. It's called gathering together, getting to know each other, rebuilding that social capital that we sometimes think is disappearing and will never be back again. No, I think it will be back. And I think it'll be back with force. Just looking at the crowd out here, it's pretty obvious that that this will be happening, or that this is happening. I want to just say a couple of words about Peter. I've gotten to know Peter Bernstein. Steen, how well do I know him? Sorry. Got to know him about a year ago. Was really impressed because I know Peter is someone who has dedicated his entire life to helping people. And he really has, he's created this Bernstein Institute just a block away from Aqus Cafe, and I kind of really feel there's some interesting energy happening around this part of Petaluma, and really great energy happening in Petaluma anyway, from people exactly like Peter, who really care and really want to do something to change and to help people. So with that, I'm going to pass that over to Peter Bernstein. Dr. Peter Bernstein. Give him put your hands together for Dr. Peter Bernstein.
Thank you. That was quite an introduction. I'm from Newark, New Jersey, not Dublin, Ireland. Anyway, you want it closer like this? All right, how's that? Good? Okay, so he comes from a much fancier, more exotic place in Ireland. I come from Newark, New Jersey, just to let you know some of my background. We're here tonight. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm so pleased to see everyone here tonight. It means a lot to us. We love this community, and everything we do, even when we do it nationally, we really think of what would work in Petaluma and what would speak to the needs of our beloved community in Petaluma. We know a lot of people. We've seen a lot of changes in this community, particularly since the recession. We specialize in dealing with trauma. It's been my field for the last 43 years, and we've written a book recently called Trauma Healing the Hidden Epidemic. It was really written with the folks in Petaluma in mind. Just want to let you know that. Tonight is a wonderful inauguration day for us. We also have a strong calling for our military, our veterans, our kids that have been, I call them kids because I'm a little older than they are. But we have a feel for the suffering of their families and how it's affected the community, what they're coming back with. I was a vet myself in Vietnam era. By the way, I want to make a correction from the newspaper. I was an infantry trainer that did not go overseas with most of my friends. Most of my friends were killed in a very short time. They were much better soldiers than I was. I just want to say that. The newspaper said I was there too. I was actually an infantry training unit that did not go overseas. Anyway, that's a long time ago. Bringing us up to date though, one of the reasons that I have such a heart for veterans and their families is a thing called survivor's guilt. That can take the form of what military kids go through when they leave their units or when they've seen their friends be killed, when they've gone through such horrors that it's hard for us to even relate to on a regular basis. But I didn't see it. I just lost my friends. Friends that I really had a very close bond with. And to this day, I carry a guilt that I didn't go with them. I love them. I love their wives, who were all pregnant by the time they went to Vietnam. And I grew up with their wives, so I knew them for years afterwards. So my heart is with them to this day and to their families. But we've also been involved with the work of trauma, not just for military. We also deal with the trauma in the community, primarily. And I want to speak to that. So as much as we're inaugurating this on Veterans Day, and we had a very full, very rich, diverse day out there in the parade, and a lot of the speakers that came up, that was very important to this community. It always is. We take part in that parade every year in gratitude to veterans and their families and what they go through for us, and the sacrifices and the selflessness that they've shown. So it's a good night, but it's also a night that's much more diverse than only for veterans or active military and their families. It's for so many people suffering in our community and have gone through so much. We call it the hidden epidemic. It is trauma. Not many people call it that. They don't know what to call it. They also don't know where to turn. And there's reasons for that. But I want to back up a little bit. I want to talk about attitudes. The reason we're here with John at the Aqus Cafe instead of the Bernstein Institute for Trauma Treatment. There's a reason. One of the things that we've been painfully aware of is the stigma that trauma holds, not just for military, but for people in the community too. That stigma, those attitudes, have stopped many people from getting the help they needed and reaching out to the community. I am on the same page as John is. Without community, there is limited healing. So no matter what I do clinically, no matter how I help, I know that without community, it's a very limited impact. To me, that's not good enough. So we've looked to the community, and then we also are aware of the stumbling blocks to people actually talking to each other, reaching out in times of need, realizing there is no shame, there's no embarrassment, they're not weak. They may be vulnerable and feeling dependent, but we're all human. We all go through these times. We all have been touched with trauma. Everybody in this room, almost everybody in this community, unless they don't tell us the truth. So our job in developing this, and John and I sat down and talked with our staff and Diane, we were looking to take the stigma away from trauma, to take the sting away from it, to create a softer, a safer, more encouraging environment. And how could we do that? Well, we came up with the Aqus community. We came up with the Resilience Cafe. And I'll talk about that name in a minute. But we wanted people to feel safe. We wanted them to have a place that they could come where they're not going to be judged. They're not going to have a clinical label placed on them. They're not going to be drugged. They're not going to be judged for whatever they're doing. but they need to have a safe place to reach out, to network, to be able to express some of the pain that they've gone through, or some of their friends that have gone through, their families, dealing with sickness, losing a loved one, the recession and the trouble that it's caused financially, the bankruptcies, the massive amount of foreclosures, the impact that that's had on families and the community itself. That needs to be dealt with. It didn't go away. People adapted. They survived. One of the things that we've learned about trauma, I'm shifting a little bit, is that people have an understanding, as an old wives' tale, time heals all wounds. That is a fallacy. It doesn't. When it comes to trauma, it has it will get what they call suppressed, pushed down, but it has what they call a cumulative effect. And trauma builds on itself. So instead of having one, we have other difficulties, and they build and build and build until one day, out of nowhere, things can be going all right. All of a sudden, these very strong emotions, logical reactions happen, and it doesn't fit anything about what's going on in the person's life now. And it scares their families. It scares them. And it's completely irrational. And it doesn't matter. It's happening anyway. We've been reading about what the vets are going through with post-traumatic stress disorder and the dramatic stories, the massive epidemic of suicides that are happening now with veterans, young kids coming home, being so depressed, and the numbness and detachment that starts wearing off. They start feeling the horrors that they've gone through and the impact. It doesn't fit now, but either do they, and they don't know what to do with it. And they become desperate and hopeless, and they go to that last stage of trauma, a post-traumatic stress disorder, when they are completely hopeless. They're giving up. They're not going to make it. And right now, that is a huge epidemic in our society. The percentage of young vets killing themselves is quite a bit higher than the norm. Okay, that's what we're looking at. We're going to talk tonight about post-traumatic stress disorder. What is that? Let me ask you something. Does anybody in here have an idea what post-traumatic stress disorder is? Just raise your hand, just so I have an idea of. So you all have a pretty good idea of post-traumatic stress disorder. So if I ask somebody right now, if they could just tell me off the top of their head what they think post-traumatic stress disorder, would somebody be willing to do that? Anybody? Would you be willing to?
Yeah, I think it's when you've received a trauma, you've experienced a trauma, and it's set up a pattern in your brain that just keeps playing and doesn't get resolved, something that doesn't get integrated into the rest of the way normal things get integrated into your brain, and then it lives in your body and resurfaces.
Okay. Very good. How about others? Yes, ma'am. And say your name, by the way.
My name's Sandra. I would just add on to that. What's your name?
Jane.
Jane. Lives in your body and your brain with deleterious effects.
Yeah.
Whereas it may have protected you initially, it's really keeping you from doing things, making you physically ill sometimes, and dysfunctional.
That's right. Very good. How about others? Yes, sir. Please say your name so we can all know who you are.
My name is Ed.
Ed, okay.
My experience of it is just a hyper alertness in my body, so that simple things that are good, maybe things I don't like, but they feel threatening. So it makes many things feel like it's a life-threatening thing. So I react to normal things as if they were dangerous and life-threatening.
Okay, good. Okay, I'm not going to go through the whole group. I got this. I'll give it out later, but John's just helping me here. That's good. Thank you. And by the way, thank you for sharing your experience. You're all on to something, by the way. Different aspects of PTSD. The body plays a tremendous role in being a storage facility for the traumatic memories. Now, we could do lots of talk therapy and counseling, and I assure you we will do that if needed be. Unless you deal with the imprint on the nervous system, and you mentioned it, it's always, what we have is it's stuck in, particularly we call it the autonomic automatic nervous system, okay? It reads our situations beyond, quicker than our intellect. We all have it, we share it with primal animals. We all have that mechanism. It has a normal cycle to it. When there's a charge, I'm sure you've all seen a deer in the field, and there's a predator, and all of a sudden it goes wide-eyed, its hair on its neck stands up, and it goes to hyper alert because there's a predator someplace that it's sensing. Okay, that's the norm. We share that kind of thing with them. When the predator leaves, though, you'll notice that the animal will shake off all that energy and hyper alertness, and the hair goes back on its neck, softens, its eyes soften, it goes back to grazing. That's what they call a self-regulatory mechanism in the automatic responses. We too have the same mechanism. So why don't these animals get PTSD like we do? You know? Well, one thing, they don't have what they call a prefrontal cortex, and they don't override. They don't think a lot like we do. We can get stuck in that hyper-aroused state, and our nervous systems gets locked right there. And everything, as Ed said, will be distorted after that. Our perceptions are fear-driven. We're always expecting the worst. We're afraid that something bad is going to happen because we haven't gone to the discharge like a more primal animal does. So here we are. We don't even go back to self-regulation anymore. We're stuck. Not just up here, in our heads, in our bodies and our nervous systems. Our job is to figure out how to decompress people and how to get them back to a self-regulating cycle. We know how to do it at the Bernstein Institute. We've been doing it for a long time. Okay, so that's a very basic understanding of PTSD, okay? It does distort our perceptions, as Ed said, afterwards. We don't see life in the present anymore because we're always basing it on that old experience and imprint. And it's affecting how we function day to day, okay? Perfect example, and I know it may be a little rough, but let's just take a woman who's been abused early in her life, okay? And she carries a tremendous amount of distrust for men. We see it a lot. And she's married to a wonderful guy who would just give his life for her. And she can't trust him. She can't tolerate too much intimacy with him. He bends over backwards to please her, protect her, to give to her, to do whatever she needs. She still can't trust. It's not based on her current situation, which isn't a bad one. It's based on being stuck in the time of abuse in her life that was so traumatizing, she never got past it. Okay. That's what they call complex developmental trauma. What does that mean? It's not a shock trauma in the present. It's based on early experiences in life that have distorted our entire development. Okay? That's one form of PTSD, complex developmental trauma. It goes way back. It's affected our development and distorted it. Okay. Then there's what most people hear as trauma is shock trauma, war experiences, a terrible physical crisis, a car crash, the shocking death of a loved one. The things that we normally consider that's shock trauma. It's outside our normal range of coping experience. So that's two types right there, developmental and shock. Then there's a third, and we call it secondary traumatization, vicarious traumatization. It happens when we help or we're involved with other people who've been traumatized. It means we begin to take on their pain. We begin to feel the trauma that they feel and begin to live it without knowing it. Our lives begin to get chaotic and deteriorate. We don't know why. All of us who are caregivers know what this feels like and know how destructive it can be. Firemen, policemen, psychotherapists, doctors, you name it. We all can suffer from secondary trauma. Without help, we burn out and our lives deteriorate, which is not a good thing. Okay, so there's three types right there of trauma. Okay? Now, I'm gonna lay that out for you tonight, and I'm gonna go, okay, there's 3 types. You can read my book and read about it. But here's the thing that's more important. What are people gonna do? Is there hope? Can they get through it? Is there really something that will heal this? Do they need the encouragement that they can get better? Do they need support to diffuse the stigma, their embarrassment and shame, their vulnerability? And the answer is there is hope. Absolutely there is hope. Can you talk somebody out of this? Go try it. I've tried it for 43 years. I'll tell you how I've done. Not too well. But here's what works. When we deal with the body and we put that together with the other kinds of work, it's amazing the receptivity that we get. And that people can be really broken loose from the past experiences and begin to live in the present and reinvent themselves and develop new coping skills and have fulfillment and spontaneity and self-assuredness again. Their whole life is not going to be misperceived by fear and anxiety and terror. No, they'll come to a new way of seeing life. And it has to do with feeling courageous. It has to do with feeling flexible and open-minded. And even when life, which throws us some pretty miserable curves, as we all know, we learn to cope with it. It's not the end of the world. We can make it. Okay, we're all going to face difficulties. Life has plenty of challenges for us, but the key really is to break loose of our old imprints, to have a new chance. And it is available to us. So as far as I'm going to go tonight, we are planning on doing this once a month here, okay? I feel that, and so does John, the need for community is essential. Why? Think about it. If you ask somebody how they're doing, and they really begin to tell you, you want to stick around and listen? Most people go, okay, that's enough. I really didn't want it, I just was saying hello. Okay, well here's the difference in community. When there's real need, and you begin to sense somebody struggling, instead of being repulsed and move away from it, we destigmatize it by going, geez, I didn't know it was that tough. You know, I'm willing to listen. You got me. And instead of running away or closing down, some way we need to become receptive as a community and offer something that's more constructive and compassionate and loving and wise. I'll tell you the first time I saw it in Petaluma on a wide scale, when the recession first hit in 2007, 2008. This was a community, excuse me, it's my community too. People were really into themselves and getting ahead and making their way and doing all right. They weren't really showing a whole lot of compassion and caring for one another until the recession hit, and their shock was overwhelming. What was really amazing to me was the caring that people began to show each other. The time they took to understand that they weren't alone and let other people know they weren't alone either. It was a wonderful, powerful experience, unfortunately through something very terrible and shocking to massive amounts of people. But to see the compassion and caring and support that came out in this community was moving enough to us to write a book about it. And we realized this community has the ability to be there for each other, no matter what the difficulties are. I'm certainly part of a community like that in Petaluma. I know many people. And frankly, we do care. And it's a pleasure to know so many good people in one community. I'm very grateful to be here. But here we are tonight. And this is the beginning of something a little bit, I wouldn't say formal, but a place where people are going to be able to come and get, not just educated, but a safe place to be able to begin to share their difficulties and their challenges and the effects on themselves, on their families, on their community, and their struggles. We want to start tonight. That was John's and my vision, and I think it's a good one. And it won't have judgment to it. It won't have sting and stigmatizing. It'll be a place where there's understanding and hope and encouragement. That's what we want to begin tonight. The Resilience Cafe. That's what comes out of letting go of old trauma. You begin to develop a sense of sureness again. Out of that comes a tolerance of spontaneity, a new resilience, an ability to reinvent and to live life in the present in a wonderful way, no matter what the challenges are. That's what we want to begin to do tonight, and you're all the beginnings of it. So we're very excited, really, and we'd like this to start now. We're going to have some small groups tonight. My administrator is going to give some directions, but I have somebody here who's on my staff. His name is Wes Easley, and I'd like to hear from him a little bit. Wes was a military, very highly trained military man. He was also a cop. He was a hostage negotiator, and one of the negotiations didn't go so good, so they broke his back. So he went back, am I right? I never got going, right? Didn't go. Anyway, Wes is back in school, getting his master's. He's reinventing himself, and he's going to be a psychologist, and he's on our staff, and we're very grateful because this is a man who knows the struggles of reintegration and change and shift through trauma. He's a wonderful guy. He's a little old to be an intern, but we're very grateful to have him. We like older people. Anyway, I'm going to turn this over to him a little bit, and then we're going to go on, turn it over to Jenny. She's going to give you some direction tonight. We're going to start some small groups in here tonight, where you will be able to talk to each other, and we'll do an icebreaker of a kind of an exercise to get started. You're not forced to do anything, but I think it could be a really nice beginning. If you don't feel like talking, you don't have to. If you feel like talking too much, the group should tone you down a little bit. Okay? On our book signings, we've realized, boy, once people open up sometimes, whoa, they've been sitting there for a long time, and we're getting it all, and we can't cover it all. If that happens, we'll be around to monitor a little bit. Let me turn this over to Wes. He's a real good man. We're grateful to have him, and I think you're going to like him.
Can you guys hear me in the back? I don't want to be too close or too far from the microphone. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, John. And most importantly, I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your time. You know, just being here, just being involved. This is my community as well. What I'll do is I'll just tell you a little bit about a short synopsis of my background. I went into the military straight out of high school. I was born and raised in Marin County, Santa Fe. I served overseas 3 separate tours. After I separated from active duty, I decided to go into law enforcement. And I did that for 14 years until I ended up injuring I had a spinal injury in the line of duty, and that happened back in 2008. And so basically what I decided to do was, after that, I figured, well, let me go ahead and get back into school, and as Peter said, reinvent myself, do something different, try and start from a new place, because I found that that was the gift. The gift was that I could start and basically reinvent who Wes Easley is at any point. Every single day I can stop and say, okay, let's evaluate where we're at, where we want to go, and make some adjustments if need be. One of the things that I thought of when I was listening to Peter talk was, that's a lot of technical information, and I've spoken with a lot of family and friends, and they don't have the grasp of what trauma is that you folks do. I mean, just the couple of people that answered, that was more information than half of the people I talk to on a daily basis, and it's kind of frightful. But what I like to do is just give you a little example of how trauma can affect your loved ones without it being so dramatic. It doesn't have to be a huge ordeal, and then the person goes into trauma. For myself, it actually had nothing to do with my combat time. I had actually been working for many, many years after I separated from the military service, and I hadn't had any issues revolving around military. But what happened was, when I got injured, all of my being, or what I thought who Wes Easley was wrapped up in my job. And so it was the title. It was, what do you do? I mean, isn't that what a lot of people ask? The first thing they, hey, how you doing? So what do you do? Like, and then it seems like everything you are is wrapped up in that title. And so when my job was no more, and it happened in a 24-hour period, after the injury, went to the hospital, some paperwork. Next thing you know, I'm getting medically retired. And what happened though is that my trauma creeped in, and I didn't even know it. I was going through all of this process, and I thought, how lucky are you to be retired and to be able to, sit back and now relax, which obviously wasn't what I wanted to do. But I noticed myself starting to detract more and more and more from social activities, from my family members, from the things that I like doing in the community, whether it be volunteering for breast cancer, fundraisers, things like that. My mother's a cancer survivor, so I really have a tight grasp on helping out with cancer survivors. But I really noticed that it wasn't a hammer dropping, if you can understand that analogy. It was a drop at a time, and the next thing I knew, the cup was starting to fill up, and I was having a hard time processing normal things that I hadn't had an issue with before. And so basically it took family members and people in my community, the people that I know, staff members at my daughter's school here in Petaluma that I talk to on a daily basis. And so over time, people drop seeds saying, well, I noticed that, you're a little more depressed most of the time than you normally are. Things like that. So why I'm telling you this is just more importantly to be aware and be cognizant of those loved ones that you have around you and the things that they say. Because I was leaving breadcrumbs for a long time before the trail was picked up, and more importantly by myself, and realizing that I alone had the power to change that. So to kind of wrap that up, basically the message is make sure that you listen to loved ones and people that are close to you, because a lot of times the message will be there. They are asking for help, and I know I was definitely asking for help, and it didn't seem to get to the folks that needed it right away, and it took my family members to kind of help lift me up and head me in the right direction. So with that, I just wanted to say, make sure that those loved ones that you do have, listen to them and even ask, if you have sons or daughters or nieces, nephews, cousins that are dealing with loss of a loved one, some type of traumatic incident, loss of a job, anything like that, because I hid what I had inside. I wasn't willing to share much because it was a pride issue. And I've done all these wonderful things, and then you look at the flip side of that coin, it's like, well, wow, Wes, that's great, but yet you're having a hard time just keeping an appointment because you're making up excuses, things like that. So anyway, I do have a tendency to ramble, so I'm going to make sure I don't take too much of your time, and I apologize, if I do jump and skip. But Peter, did you have some activities for the round table that we wanted to do, or did you want me to?
No, you can do that.
You want me to do it? Okay.
I never knew he could talk like this. This is good. We're going to work as a team. This is really good. Great. This is wonderful. Yeah, he's been great. And when we have kids that are separated from the military having tough times, this is the expert at the Bernstein Institute. He is wonderful. He can help them speak a new language and adjust and reintegrate. He's really an expert at it. Yes, we do have something we planned, and I'm going to turn this over to our administrator at the Bernstein Institute. This is Jenny Stevenson. She's an engineer. She calls herself a chemical engineer in recovery, but she runs our place. She runs my life, too.
Thank you, Peter. What we're going to do now, and the next part of our evening, is a chance for us to break up into some small groups. And I tried to do kind of a rough scan of the room. We would like to have 7 groups. And I think that's roughly 7, maybe 8 people or so. What we want to do now is have a chance to share some of the responses to what you've heard tonight, some of your thoughts about trauma, possibly even, if you're willing, some of your experiences. A chance to do some of what Peter and Wes both talked about the time when you don't just say, if someone asks you how you are and you just say, oh, I'm fine. You know, maybe tonight just say a little bit about how you really are. So I do have some ground rules. We're going to take, I'm looking at my watch, we're going to take till, maybe about 8:30, a little before 8:30. At that point, what we were going to do for the final part of the evening for about maybe a half hour or so is to get back together and kind of talk about some of the things that came up in the group, talk about where we might want to go in the future, how Resilience Cafe could serve this community and serve the people here tonight. So some of the ground rules for the group, and I imagine many people have already been in group, these will sound familiar, but basically no one has to talk. You don't have to talk. We encourage sharing, but it's entirely up to you. I would ask that you respect the confidentiality of the people in your group. Whatever you hear here stays here. I think using first names would be a great thing. If you're in your group, you can just use your first name. You do not need to give anyone your last name. All right? Sometimes when you haven't had a chance to let go of things or talk about things, sometimes you get started and you find you just can't stop. I would ask that try to let everyone in the group have a chance to talk. And we're going to have a facilitator, leader for each group, and they're going to try to help make sure that everyone has a chance to talk. They're going to kind of guide the conversation in case no one wants to talk. We have a beginning exercise, and I can introduce it. Wes was going to, but he's gone. So I might introduce that. We'll see. Anyway, another basic guideline is please remember to be constructive and not critical. Okay, that's kind of basic. And the other thing is, I'm aware that there are probably some practitioners or providers of trauma services or specialties here tonight. We are asking nothing promotional, okay? We are here tonight to build community and trust and encourage sharing. Our motto is listen, share, and heal. And so if you are a provider and would like us to be aware of your work, we have a sign-up sheet here that you can give us your name and contact info. And it's possible down the road we might put together a list of resources in the community. But that's where we are for tonight, is no promotion, just join in, just participate, okay? Wes, would you like to introduce, we have a kind of an icebreaker activity for the group, just to kind of get started. And Wes was the one who came up with it. Would you like to do it, or do you want me to? It's the cards.
Okay. Hey, it's good to see everyone again. Thank you. It's kind of starting to get addictive. What we were thinking about doing was 3x5 cards, and each person who wants to participate, each person take a 3x5 card and write down on that 3x5 card, fairly briefly, what either you believe trauma looks like, or it could be how you think trauma has affected someone. Obviously, try not to name anybody, but how has trauma affected either yourself or someone that you know? You know, what are the signs of trauma? What do you think it looks like? And that was the idea, is to basically have each person in the group write that down on the 3x5 card, and then have the proctor or whoever is going to be leading up the team basically use that as the icebreaker, so that way you can start a dialogue within the group and basically see the differences of what one person might think PTSD or trauma might look like and someone else. And so with that, it stirs up some type of conversation, which is the point of it. So that's what we were thinking about doing, and we're going to do it. All right, great, wonderful.
I hope this worked, was a nice icebreaker and a good, a beginning assistance to all of you. This is going to be by the way, I want to reiterate something. What goes on in here, hello? What goes on in here, hello? Hello? Stays here, okay? And we don't want to have things come out in the community. Keep it here, keep it confidential and personal. We want to make this a very safe environment. I mean, at the Institute I can do it, now we got to make sure it's done here too. So all of you make a commitment to keep this here so it's a trustworthy place. Anyway, I'd like to go around and just hear from the leaders what came up tonight. I know that, by the way, I know there's some very meaningful causes and some things that people would like to promote tonight, but this is not a night for promotion. There's a lot of meaningful things to be done, and I've seen some of them, but we really can't do it tonight. It wouldn't be fair to the others. So another night, perhaps next month in our next meeting, we'll figure out how to do that. But at this point, let's just hear what happened tonight, and let's get started, all right? So I'm just going to start over here. Jenny, I'm going to give her the mic and let me hear what's going on.
Could I hand it off to someone else in the group? Would that be all right? No, I would pass the. I had our group. Our group was full of people with a lot of experience and depth and sensitivity to the process of working through trauma. In my group, we have people with cancer survivors, lost a son, who work daily with people who have come back from Iraq and Afghanistan, people who have experienced developmental trauma. I had a group who have been there and talked about the value of touch and acceptance, how crucial acceptance is when you're going through something, and what just someone coming over and saying, I'm here, without expectations, without pressure, without tell me what to do, just being there, how valuable that is, and that's my assessment.
That's called a good way to diffuse stigma and create an understanding. That's wonderful. That sounded like it was a good group here. All right, my friend.
All right. Well, I was fortunate to have a wonderful group here in front, and we talked about many different topics. And everyone here at this table, I'm sure everyone at every table has got more than enough life experience to cover just about any type of trauma. But we spoke about trauma symptomology. We also talked about the need for empathy, something I was talking about earlier. Listening, that's the first step. We also spoke about the body and the mind connection. I had one past and one current practitioner in the group doing, I'll just say that body work, lamest terms. Future focus on treatment. That was a topic that we talked about briefly as well. Transitioning through PTSD, if you do know someone or work with someone who does have and suffers from PTSD, definitely working through that. And then most importantly, the need for community support. There were several folks that talked about that, and I think that's very important, and that was one of the best topic lines that I heard was, the community getting together and supporting one another, which is what we're all doing here tonight. So, thank you.
That's good. That's great. And we feel that working with the body is essential to healing trauma the other way. So that was wonderful. And community is going to be very important to the whole process. Okay, hello, you want to tell us what you're doing?
Yeah, I really enjoyed my group. And we talked about everything from returning from the Vietnam War and all the trauma that was experienced there and how it affected this person's life. And then realizing that they had been in denial most of their life until fairly recently. And we went on to talk about PTSD and how it had affected their body and how much they knew they needed to really find out more about this. We talked about trauma, developmental trauma, and how it had affected their life fear-wise all their life, and that how they had finally been able to come to grips with it and find a better place, actually realizing that they were focusing more on present today versus their trauma. We talked about how we can all create our own trauma in our life and how that is something that we all have to be very careful of. My goodness, we covered a lot of it. Oh, and one of the group members said that they suddenly realized tonight that they were experiencing trauma, but it was in such a subtle way that they hadn't even thought about it as trauma. And that it was something that they realized they were going to have to really look at, take care of, and that it was a wonderful place to be able to come and be able to talk about it and just to be able to communicate it. So I think we covered a lot of area. It's very good.
Very good. One of the things that Hello is bringing up that came up in our group is called an element of traumatizing called reenactment, where we can continually re-traumatize ourselves. And that's actually not just in the head, that's in the nervous system. That's a subject that we really need to talk about next time. That's a very powerful, can be a very destructive force in our lives. But we work on that a lot. I'm glad that came up. That's an important one. Anyway, who's the next group? Okay, Colleen?
I'm so appreciative of people's willingness to open up to strangers. It's impressive. Our group talked a lot about, well, some people are more currently dealing with trauma, some it's more in the past, some are helping others work through trauma as well as their own trauma. We talked about hope and joy and a purpose to the pain, that once you're more on the other side of it, you can discover the purpose to it, and it makes you stronger, it makes you more human, it makes you a person that other people can relate to, and it can be a gift. It can be hard to get there, but it is a gift. Another really practical point that came out is that as you make small steps in dealing with your trauma, to acknowledge them in yourself and give yourself a little pat on the back, whether it's just showing up here tonight or sharing that with a friend or a stranger, as happened this evening, to recognize that, and that's going to help you progress through it and heal.
Very good. Very good. In her group, what came up tonight was the transformative power of trauma. It doesn't have to be all negative. That's the theme of this. It's called Resilience Cafe. That's part of the transformative quality of trauma. And there is something to struggling and suffering and coming out the other side a much better person. You could always walk down, open the door to hell and walk down that. That's a choice. Or you can choose to find healing and move into a journey that's life-changing and creates an authenticity and a realness that makes it, for us, a very fulfilling calling in our lives to help others do. Anyway, we've got some very good themes coming up here tonight, every group. Here's Dwight.
Our group was a touching example of something I wrote down on my napkin: listen, share, and heal. And we did all three of those, I think. It certainly touched me, and I could feel that healing going on. We talked about how the body keeps us from doing what we want to do, we know we should do, we know how to do it, but we can't. Like loving, we can't. We want to love, we want to give, but there's something, fear keeps us from doing that. And we talked about the community, that being able to put this out can help us to heal.
Thank you. Okay, one more group, and then I just want to ask a couple of questions, and then we'll be closing up for tonight. Larry?
We had a very interesting group. Two of our members are experiencing trauma right now and are experiencing a lot of emotional pain behind that. We looked at what it is not, that it is not just targeted toward people in the military, that it comes out in different forms. We talk about how PTSD is a way of, it's not a way, it's a manner of being stuck and being frustrated, not being able to get beyond that. We looked at the notion, does trauma at an early age, is it different than trauma at a later age? And yes, of course, there is a significant difference between the two of them. Frankly, this was a really exciting, stimulating group, and the majority of which are planning to come back next month.
Take it over from there. That's what I want to find out. It sounds like you all hit on some very important issues that are core to, first of all, becoming aware and understanding better what trauma is about. The next stage is, okay, what does it take to heal? And there are ways to heal, and we feel this is a beginning. I'd like to know from everybody, we'd like to do this on a once-a-month basis and start this. We'd also like more people to come, even though we've taken up all the room. I'd like it to get out to more people in the community. The needs are much greater than just what we see in here. But I do applaud you all for the courage that you've shown tonight to be here. Really. Yeah. Then I want another question. How many of you would be willing to partake on a more regular basis with this Trauma Resilience Cafe vision of ours? Looks good to me. Looks good to you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Good to go.
I think you're really looking at something that is going to make a big impact on this community. I guarantee it. Just getting this started has astounded me. We've been trying for years to reach out into the community with our book and whatever, and we make inroads, and this thing is just picking up steam so quickly. It shocked the two of us. We didn't expect it. We're very happy about it. And I think we got the beginnings of something very special, and you're the core of what we're starting here. And I'm very grateful for all of you tonight and what you've been willing to do. You're going to help formulate where we go from here. We're going to, we'll get in touch with you for the next group, right? And put the word out, all of you. And let other people know that this thing is available. It's going to be part of our community, and it's going to be a brand new healing dimension in Petaluma and Sonoma County. And I'm very excited and enthusiastic about this. I hope you all will be too. There is hope for healing. I'm telling you the truth. Anyway, God bless. Have a wonderful night, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much.